It has been quite a while since I've done some serious sewing, anything more than just like a hem here or there. It's probably been like 7 or 8 years. The other day I was wandering through Goodwill, of course, and I came across these curtains in this beautiful toile fabric, and I was just completely obsessed. But in the moment I knew that I wouldn't use them as actual curtains in our home, so I decided to leave them. But then I thought about them all night long, and I just knew I needed to get them. So I went back the next day and I got them. There was 2 pieces. They were kind of a weird size. I think they were more like valances than full-size curtains. And so they were still fairly big, but they were sort of more like wide than they were long. In total, I think I spent $12 on both of the curtains. Initially, I didn't have like a super specific idea of what I wanted to do. I had a couple ideas. So of course I turned to Instagram to find out what everybody else thought I should make. My 3 main ideas were to either, remake new curtains that would actually like fit our windows, or maybe make some like throw pillows, which would be really lovely, or to make a dress. And I said dress, not really sure if I even had enough fabric for a dress, but I just figured it was sort of like a holding space for some sort of clothing item. And when the results from my Instagram poll came in, it was basically tied, a 3-way tie between all 3. So that was super helpful. So in the end, I just decided to go with my gut and, make some sort of clothing piece. But since I was a little concerned about how much fabric I had and whether or not I had enough and big enough pieces to cut out what I would need, I decided to sort of pare it down, and I decided to go with making a corset top. I have never made anything quite like a corset top before, so I knew it would be a little bit of a challenge and there would be some learning curves, but I decided to give it a try. Of course, I needed to start by deconstructing the curtains themselves and separating out all of the pieces. Since I wasn't sure how much fabric I would definitely need and how much fabric I actually had, I decided to play it safe. So I used a seam ripper to remove all of the previous stitching so that I could keep all of the pieces of fabric fully intact. This took a couple hours to do, but it was kind of the perfect excuse to just like catch up on some of my shows, and it's actually a pretty relaxing activity in my opinion. Once I got all of the pieces separated out, I just went over and gave all of them a really good in-depth ironing. I ended up purchasing a digital pattern from a seller on Etsy. I will link the pattern below in case you want to make it yourself. I am a huge visual learner, so I really appreciated that this pattern had a video that went along with it. It was really helpful to reference when I got confused, which, as somebody who hasn't sewn in quite a long time, I did get confused a few times, but it was pretty easy to follow it along. But once I printed out the pattern, I just trimmed some of the pattern pieces and then taped them all together, and I cut it out just like you would for any normal pattern. Even though I used the medium-sized pattern, I actually cut the shoulder straps out to the longest size available. I am pretty tall, so I had a feeling that it would just fit a little bit better on me and my shoulders with that extra length, and I am really glad that I did. Once I had all of the toile cut out, I went ahead and cut out some light interfacing and I ironed it onto those pieces. I didn't want it to be super stiff, but I did want just a little bit more structure to it. I also went ahead and used the same lining from the original curtains for the corset lining. Once I had all of my pieces laid out and ready to go, overall the instructions were pretty easy to follow. And like I mentioned before, it was often helpful to be able to refer back to that video. Growing up, I remember trying to learn to follow the classic patterns, the kind that you would buy just like at Joann's, and I always felt like I would get so easily confused by all of the wording, but now I am fully obsessed with finding these digital patterns online that come with videos. It's a huge lifesaver. So last night, as I was working on my little project here, I got to a few points in the pattern where I had to kind of focus a little bit more on all the steps and like making sure that I was doing it quite right. And as I did that, I kind of started to forget to take some video of some of the steps that I was doing. So I thought I would just show you this morning what I have gotten done so far and, where I'm currently at. So very exciting. It's starting to actually look like something. Last night I did get the front piece done as well as the back piece, and then I sewed them together and I went ahead and like pressed them down just to like really make sure that they fit together well. There's a few spots that you really can only tell on the lining where maybe they didn't line up quite perfectly, but I think overall it's a decent job. So we're going to jump back into finishing this up today. I'd really like to finish this up, and I think that that's realistic. And I also think that there's a small chance that we actually have enough fabric left over to maybe make a skirt to match it. I don't know. I don't want to jinx it, but I think that there's a chance. The next big step was creating the channels for the boning to go into. So that was just a matter of spacing out lines of stitching that the boning would fit inside of. Once I trimmed the boning to the right size, I added just a little bit of hot glue and fabric to the ends to prevent the boning from poking through. This isn't necessarily the best way to do this, but I think I remembered my mom using this method at some point, so I just did it that way. After I got the boning placed inside of the corset, I went ahead and closed up the bottom seam, and suddenly it was just like really starting to feel like it was all coming together, which was really exciting. I'm not going to lie, this next part was definitely the hardest of the whole project. It actually took me quite a while and quite a bit of experimenting to figure out how to make the holes and place the eyelets properly. I talked to somebody really knowledgeable from my local sewing shop, and he did recommend using an owl for making the eyelet hole. However, when I tried it with the fabric, I could not for the life of me to get it to make a big enough hole without creating a huge mess. I ended up finding these drill bits that are actually made for creating holes in sailcloth. I tested them out a ton before finally committing to using them on these actual corset, but I have to say they actually worked super well for me. Once I got one side of the eyelets done, I just used them to trace out the placements for the other side. I also needed eyelets at the top of the bodice as well as the shoulder straps so that I could add ribbon and connect the two. One thing I added to the corset that wasn't included in the original pattern is just this little piece of fabric to go behind the eyelets and ties. I personally just wanted a small bit of coverage in case the ribbon had any see-through, so I just went ahead and hand stitched it into the lining so you really don't see it at all when the corset is tied up. At the recommendation of the expert from my local sewing shop, I did get some really lovely double-faced satin ribbon. I forgot to get video of it, but I did singe the ribbon ends to keep them from unraveling. Please excuse my ridiculous outfit while I finished adding the last bits of ribbon. You can kind of see here where the straps hit me. I feel like they kind of came out perfectly for me, so just keep in mind if you're tall or long torso gal, you can always cut the straps a little bit longer to work better for your body type. I am honestly like pretty obsessed with how this came out, especially because I really haven't been sewing like at all these last couple of years. So I kind of expected it to be a lot more of like a struggle, and I kind of expected it to not turn out that well, if I'm being completely honest. But I think it came out so cute, and I'm kind of like I said, I'm obsessed with it. It's adorable. I realized that I had like just enough fabric left over to make a skirt. And so I got a pattern for it. I printed it out. I cut everything out. I started putting it together. And then I realized that I had cut out the pattern wrong. It was unusable at that point. So unfortunately, even though it would have been like, I mean, can you imagine insanely cute to have like a little matching set? Like, ugh. But I had to give up on that, unfortunately. But I do think that it looks really cute with just this like more boho skirt anyway. So I'm still pretty happy, but part of me is still mourning the loss of a matching set for this. So, you know, you win some, you lose some. Overall though, this was just like a super inspiring project for me to work on. I feel like I've always been intimidated by the idea of making my own clothes. But this really, like, I thought that this would be a lot harder than it was, and I really enjoyed this project. So I honestly think I would love this summer to maybe make more of my own clothes, and especially like going to the thrift store and finding like bed sheets and then remaking them into something new, into dresses and all that stuff for the summer. I would really love to do that. As somebody who's an awkward size, I have the hardest time finding stuff that actually fits me correctly. So I kind of now am inspired to maybe start trying to make my own clothes and then like be able to actually make them so that they fit me correctly. So that may be something that I work on a little bit more this summer. Anyway, thank you so much for watching all the way to the end. It means so much to me. I can't even tell you, but I hope you are having a lovely day, and I will see you next time.